The round that shattered the Humvee's windshield seemed to materialize from thin air. One moment, Chief Petty Officer Sarah McKenna was braced in the back seat, rifle across her chest, scanning the darkness through night vision goggles that painted the Mexican desert in shades of green. The next, she was weightless, thrown into a violent spiral as the vehicle rolled once, twice, three times before slamming into the ravine with the sound of tearing metal and breaking glass. Something hard, maybe the turret frame, maybe the armored door, collided with her skull. Her vision exploded into scattered stars. Pain radiated through her body in waves she couldn't separate or identify. And when the world finally stopped spinning, when the grinding metal fell silent and the dust began to settle, Sarah realized something that cut deeper than any physical wound. She was alone, completely, utterly alone. The desert night pressed in from all sides, vast and indifferent. Somewhere in the darkness, engines roared her team's vehicles, racing away through the kill zone exactly as protocol demanded. If you can't pull everyone out, you save who you can and return for the rest. She knew the doctrine. She'd trained on it. But knowing didn't make it hurt any less. Sarah dragged herself through the shattered window, tasting blood and sand. Every muscle screamed protest. Her ears rang with a high-pitched whine that drowned out everything else. But training took over that deep programming that SEAL instructors had hammered into her through 18 months of hell. Check for injuries. She flexed her fingers, rotated her shoulders, bent her knees. Everything worked. Nothing obviously broken. Blood ran down her face from a scalp laceration, but head wounds always bled heavily. Not fatal, not yet. Find your weapon. Her M4 was still strapped across her chest, somehow intact. She ran her hands over it in the darkness, checking by feel. 4 magazines, 120 rounds. It would have to be enough. Get oriented. The Humvee lay on its side like a dying animal. The driver, Petty Officer Hayes, was clearly dead, his neck bent at an angle that left no doubt. In the back seat, Petty Officer Tyler Grant, the team's breacher, and the closest thing Sarah had to a brother, wasn't moving. She pressed 2 fingers against his carotid artery. Nothing. Sarah closed her eyes, allowed herself 3 seconds of grief, then moved on. SEALs didn't have the luxury of mourning in the field. Her radio had been crushed against the Humvee's frame during the rollover. Useless, and her Camelback 3 liters of water she'd filled at the fob had burst in the crash. She watched the last of it disappear into the thirsty sand, knowing that loss might kill her faster than any bullet. The sound of engines grew louder, multiple vehicles closing in on her position from different directions. They'd be here in minutes, expecting to find bodies or wounded survivors ready for capture. She had to move. Now, Sarah grabbed the one intact water bottle she could find, 500 milliliters, barely enough for an hour in this heat, and slipped away from the wreck. She moved low and fast, using every fold in the terrain, every shadow, every lesson her grandfather had taught her 15 years ago in the deserts of Arizona. Because Sergeant Jake McKenna hadn't just been her grandfather. He'd been her teacher, her mentor, the man who'd shaped everything she'd become. 15 years earlier, the Arizona sun beat down like a physical weight, turning the air into something you could chew. 13-year-old Sarah McKenna stood in the middle of a dry creek bed, hands on her hips, frustrated, tears threatening to spill. "There's no water here, Grandpa. It's bone dry." Jake McKenna was 79 years old, but he moved through the desert like a man half his age. Korean War veteran. 3 tours. Chosen reservoir survivor. The kind of old soldier who carried his wars, quietly wore them in the set of his shoulders and the far-off look that sometimes crossed his weathered face. He knelt in the sand, pressing his palm flat against the ground. "You're looking with your eyes, Sarah. Desert teaches you to look with your mind." He pointed to a patch of sand 20 feet away, slightly darker than the rest, more compacted. "See that?" Sarah squinted. "It looks different. Darker sand means moisture underneath. Plants with deeper roots nearby mean water tables close. The way the rocks are worn smooth here," he gestured to the creek bed's edges, "tells you water ran through recently, maybe last monsoon season. Desert remembers water even when you can't see it." He pulled a small folding shovel from his pack and began to dig. 3 feet down, the sand turned muddy. Another foot in water began seeping into the hole. Sarah's eyes widened. "How did you know?" Jake looked up at her, and Sarah saw something in his eyes she'd remember for the rest of her life. Pride mixed with a soldier's hard-earned wisdom. "Chosen reservoir, winter of 1950. 30 degrees below zero. Chinese came at us in waves 10,000 strong. We were surrounded, cut off, no supplies. Men were freezing to death in their sleeping bags. We had to melt snow for water, but hypothermia was killing us faster than the bullets. He sat back on his heels, lost in memory for a moment. They called it a retreat. Hell, we called it advancing in a different direction. But Sarah, here's what I learned in that frozen hell: survival isn't about strength. It's about will. It's about knowing that the environment, whether it's ice or sand, doesn't care about you, doesn't hate you, doesn't love you. It just is. The desert kills careless men. The cold kills weak-willed men. But the worst killer, Sarah leaned forward. What? Quitting. Sarah knelt beside him, touched the wet sand. Will you teach me everything? All the survival stuff? Jake smiled, the kind of smile that carried 3 wars worth of ghosts, but still held on to something hopeful. Every weekend until you know it by heart. Deal, deal, deal. They shook hands there in that dry creek bed, and Sarah felt something shift inside her. A sense of purpose she'd been searching for without knowing it. Her father had died before she was born, Marine Corps training accident, buried with honors at Arlington. She'd grown up with the shape of his absence, the photograph on the mantel, the folded flag her mother kept in a glass case. But here in the desert with her grandfather, Sarah found something to fill that space. A connection to warriors who'd come before. A path forward. Over the next 3 years, Jake taught her everything. How to navigate by the stars when compasses failed. How to find water in impossible places. How to move through terrain without leaving tracks. How to build fires that produce no smoke. How to survive on nothing but will and knowledge. And on Sarah's 16th birthday, 3 months after the cancer diagnosis, Jake taught her the final lesson. They sat together on the porch of his small house outside Prescott, watching the sun paint the desert in shades of gold and red. Jake's hands shook slightly, not from age, but from the disease eating through his lungs. Too many years breathing Agent Orange in Korean trenches, the VA doctor said. Nothing they could do now but manage the pain. Sarah, he said quietly, I'm not going to see you graduate high school. We both know that. Grandpa, let me finish. He turned to look at her, and his eyes were clear despite everything. I've watched you these past 3 years. Watched you push yourself harder than any kid your age should have to. You've got something inside you, something I recognize. The same thing that got me through Chosin. The same thing your daddy had. Sarah's throat tightened. I want to join the Navy, become a SEAL. Jake didn't look surprised. I figured as much. It's going to be the hardest thing you've ever attempted. They're going to tell you that you don't belong, that you're not strong enough, not tough enough, that women have no business in the teams. I know. But here's what they don't know. Jake reached over and gripped her hand with surprising strength. They don't know about these 3 years. They don't know I've been training you since you were 13. They don't know that you can find water where there isn't any, that you can navigate by stars, that you've learned every survival trick a Korean War vet could teach. He paused, caught his breath. Promise me something, Sarah. When you make it through, not if, when you remember why you're doing this. Not to prove anything to people who doubt you, but because it's who you are. Because warriors run in your blood. Because your country needs people who refuse to quit when things get impossible. I promise, Grandpa. And promise me one more thing. His grip tightened. When you're out there, when everything's gone to hell, and you're alone and scared and ready to give up, you remember that the desert kills those who quit. You remember that McKenna's don't quit. Not in Korea, not in life, not ever. Sarah felt tears running down her face, didn't bother wiping them away. I promise. Jake McKenna died 6 weeks later. They buried him with full military honors at the VA cemetery in Phoenix. Sarah stood beside her mother holding the folded flag and made a silent vow over his grave. She would become the warrior he'd trained her to be, no matter what it cost. 6 years later, the Pacific Ocean was 53 degrees and black as ink when Sarah hit the water for the 4th time that night. Hell Week, Day 3. The crucible that broke 80% of SEAL candidates. 120 hours of continuous training with a maximum of 4 hours sleep total. Cold, wet, sandy, exhausted to the point of hallucination. Instructors screaming in your face, looking for any sign of weakness, any excuse to wring you out. Sarah treaded water in the dark, her boat crew scattered around her. They'd capsized their inflatable boat small for the 3rd time in an hour. Her hands were so cold she could barely grip the paddle. Her legs felt like lead weights. Her whole body shook uncontrollably. Beside her, a male candidate named Morrison was crying. Not from pain, from exhaustion and cold, and the absolute certainty that he couldn't do this anymore. "I can't," he gasped. "I can't do this. I'm done." "No, you're not," Sarah said through chattering teeth. "We're not done until we're done." "It's easy for you to say easy." Sarah grabbed the boat's rope, started pulling herself toward it. "You think this is easy? I'm just as cold as you, just as tired, just as ready to quit." "Then why don't you?" Sarah remembered her grandfather's stories of Chosin Reservoir, 15,000 Marines surrounded by 100,000 enemies. "Because I promised someone I'd never quit, and I keep my promises." She reached the boat, grabbed Morrison's vest, pulled him toward the rope. "Now get your ass on this boat and paddle. We've got 3 more hours until dawn." The instructors noticed. They always noticed. Senior Chief Marcus Kane, the toughest instructor in the entire SEAL training pipeline, waded into the water until he stood chest deep, staring at Sarah's boat crew. "McKenna," his voice cut through the darkness like a knife. "You think you're some kind of hero? Think you're going to save your weak-ass teammates?" "No, Senior Chief." "Then why are you still in my ocean? Why haven't you rung that bell?" Sarah treaded water, looked him straight in the eye. "Because I'm not done yet, Senior Chief." "You're not done." Kane's face was inches from hers now. "I've seen grown men twice your size quit today. Rangers, Force Recon, Para-Rescue. The best of the best and all gone. But you little Sarah McKenna from Arizona, you think you're tougher than them." "I don't know about tougher, Senior Chief, but I know I'm not quitting." Something flickered in Kane's eyes. Not sympathy, SEAL instructors didn't do sympathy, but maybe respect, maybe recognition of something familiar. "We'll see," he said quietly. "We'll see how tough you are when we hit the surf torture in 2 hours." He waded back to shore, leaving Sarah and her boat crew in the dark water. Morrison looked at her. "Why do you do this to yourself?" Sarah paused, considering her answer carefully. Her grandfather's lessons, her father's sacrifice, the weight of promises made over graves, all of it crystallized into one truth. "Because someone has to prove it's possible," she said finally. "Someone has to kick the door open for the women who come after." They made it through that night, made it through surf torture, sitting in the frigid ocean, while instructors sprayed them with hoses, watching for the first person to stand up and quit. Made it through the next day, and the next, and somehow impossibly, through all 5.5 days of Hell Week. When it was over, when they stood in formation with the survivors, 18 out of an original class of 140, Sarah caught Senior Chief Kane looking at her with something that might have been approval. He pulled her aside afterwards, spoke quietly so the others couldn't hear. "I had you pegged to quit by day 2, he admitted. "Thought you were here to make a statement, prove a point, then ring out when reality hit. But you've got something I don't see often, something that can't be taught." He paused. "Your grandfather, he was Jake McKenna, Korean War Chosin Reservoir." Sarah blinked in surprise. "You knew him, knew of him. We studied Chosin in survival training. What those men endured." Kane shook his head. "Now I understand where you get it from. That refusal to quit. It's genetic." He looked at her seriously. "You've got a long road ahead. Hell Week's just the beginning. Dive phase, land warfare, SEER training. And even if you make it through all that, proving yourself never stops. Every mission, every deployment, you'll have to prove you belong all over again." "I know, Senior Chief. But if anyone can do it," Kane extended his hand. "Welcome to the teams, McKenna." Sarah shook his hand, felt the calluses and scars of a warrior who'd earned his place through blood and pain. She'd done it. Made it through buds, earned Ice Trident. But the real test was still to come. Present day, February 2024. Sarah crouched in the shallow depression, watching the enemy patrol through her rifle scope. 4 men moving in loose formation toward the burning Humvee she'd abandoned 20 minutes ago. They were cartel, but not the usual thugs. These men moved with military precision, checked their corners, used proper hand signals. And they were following the blood trail. She deliberately left drops of her own blood, marking a path away from the crash site before she'd circled back to high ground. The radio clipped to one man's vest crackled. A voice spoke in English, but with a heavy Eastern European accent. Ukrainian, Sarah thought. She'd worked with Ukrainian special forces during a joint training exercise in 2022, recognized the particular rhythm of the language. Patrol 3 report status. Do you have eyes on the American? The patrol leader keyed his radio. Following blood trail northeast. She's wounded, moving slow. We'll have her in 10 minutes. Negative. Stop pursuit immediately and return to compound. The patrol leader looked confused. Sir, we nearly have her. That's an order. This is not ordinary prey. She's a SEAL, which means she's trained in escape and evasion, which means that blood trail is exactly what she wants you to follow. Return. Now. Sarah felt grudging respect for whoever was on the other end of that radio. He understood. Understood that wounded didn't mean helpless. That desperation made predators not prey. But the patrol leader was arrogant, young, eager to prove himself. With respect, Colonel Volkov, it's 4 of us against 1 injured woman. We can handle. You're not listening. That 1 injured woman has been through training you can't imagine. She's survived Hell Week, dive phase, SEER school. She knows how to kill you 17 different ways with her bare hands. And right now, she's probably watching you through a rifle scope, deciding which one of you dies first. The patrol leader's head snapped up, scanning the rocks. Too late. Sarah had already made her decision. She'd positioned herself 200 meters away, elevated with the setting sun behind her every advantage. And she'd spent the last 10 minutes calculating wind distance and the precise order of shots that would give her the best chance of taking all 4 before they could react or take cover. The patrol leader would die first. He was the most dangerous, the best trained. Then the radio man cut off their communications. Then the machine gunner, because that weapon could pin her down. Finally, the rear guard. 4 shots. 4 seconds. Then she'd be moving before they could triangulate her position. Sarah controlled her breathing. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Let her heartbeat slow to the steady rhythm her instructors had drilled into her. Found that still place inside where fear couldn't reach, and heard her grandfather's voice as clear as if he stood beside her. Sarah, sometimes surviving means doing terrible things. Means crossing lines you never wanted to cross. When that moment comes, you don't think about the taking of life. You think about the lives you're saving by taking it. Sarah exhaled slowly, settled her finger on the trigger. I'm sorry, she whispered to the men in her scope. Then she fired. The suppressed M4 made 4 distinct cracks in rapid succession. The patrol leader dropped first, the radio man half a second later. The machine gunner tried to bring his weapon up, but Sarah's 3rd round caught him center mass. The rear guard started to run, and Sarah's 4th shot dropped him at full sprint. 4 bodies, 4 seconds. Exactly as planned. Sarah didn't move immediately, held her position, scanning for any sign she'd been spotted or that reinforcements were coming. The desert was silent except for the wind. No shouts, no engines, no return fire. Only then did she allow herself to feel it. The weight of what she'd just done. She'd killed men before in Afghanistan and Iraq in a dozen classified operations she'd never be able to talk about. But always as part of a team. Always with support. Always knowing that her brothers were there, that she wasn't alone in carrying that burden. This was different. This was her alone making the choice to take 4 lives. Sarah closed her eyes, pushed the emotions down into that locked place where warriors kept their ghosts. She'd deal with it later. Process it later. Right now, she had to focus on the only thing that mattered. Survival. She moved down to the bodies quickly and efficiently, searching them. Found 6 liters of water liquid gold in the desert. Found spare magazines for AK-47s, which wouldn't fit her M4, but she took them anyway. Found a detailed map of the area with patrol routes marked. Found energy bars and first aid supplies. And found the radio. Sarah hesitated, staring at the military-grade radio in her hands. It was encrypted but active, which meant she could listen to enemy communications, track their movements, maybe even call for help if she could figure out the encryption. Or it meant they could track her. She made a decision, switched the radio to receive-only mode, and clipped it to her vest. Knowledge was survival, and right now she needed every advantage. The truck was parked 50 meters away. Sarah approached, carefully checked for traps or tracking devices, found none. The keys were still in the ignition. For a moment, she considered it. She could drive, make a run for the American border 40 miles north. Maybe she'd make it. Maybe air support would find her before the cartel did. But probably not. They'd have roadblocks set up, drones watching the main routes, and in a vehicle she'd be visible from miles away, an easy target for anything from small arms to RPGs. No, the smart play was to disappear into the terrain, use the skills her grandfather had taught her, become a ghost. But before she went ghost, she could do some damage. Sarah spent the next 20 minutes setting a trap. Position the bodies back in the truck, arrange them to look like they were resting. Set 2 claymore mines in the rocks overlooking the truck, wired to a remote detonator she'd carried for exactly this kind of situation. Left the radio on volume up so it would look like the patrol was still active. Then she recorded a message in Spanish passable from her years working with Mexican special forces and set it to play on loop. Ayuda. Estamos heridos. Necesitamos ayuda. Help. We're injured. We need help. It was cruel, but warfare was cruel, and every enemy soldier she took out of the fight was one less threat to her survival. Sarah withdrew to a ridge 400 meters away, settled behind her rifle scope, and waited. She didn't have to wait long. 20 minutes later, 2 more trucks appeared racing toward the disabled patrol. They must have been monitoring the radio frequency, heard the call for help. 8 men total armed and moving fast. They found the truck with the bodies, spread out to search the area calling for the missing patrol members. Sarah gave them 3 minutes to cluster around the vehicle, to drop their guard, to feel safe. Then she triggered the clay mines. The explosion tore through the desert silence like thunder. Hundreds of steel ball bearings shredded everything within a 30-meter radius. Men screamed, vehicles burned, chaos erupted. Sarah didn't feel satisfaction, didn't feel guilt, felt only that cold calculation that kept warriors alive when everything went to hell. She'd bought herself time, maybe hours, maybe a full night. She'd make it count. As Sarah melted back into the desert, the radio on her vest crackled to life. That same Ukrainian accented voice, but different now. Harder, colder. Well played, American. Very well played. A pause. My name is Colonel Anton Volkov, former Ukrainian Special Forces, current tactical advisor to the Cortez cartel. And I want you to know something. I'm not angry about the men you've killed. I'm impressed. Sarah kept moving, didn't respond. You're thinking like a guerrilla fighter now. Good. That's what you need to survive out here, but understand this, you've just declared war on the most sophisticated military operation in northern Mexico. I have 40 trained soldiers, drones, night vision, everything we need to hunt you. The voice paused again, and when it continued, Sarah heard something unexpected. Respect. But you know what? I hope you make it. I hope you survive. Because hunts like this, hunts against a worthy opponent, those are the only ones worth remembering. So run American SEAL, hide, fight, show me what you're made of. And when we finally meet, another pause. When we finally meet, I'll make sure you die with honor. You have my word as a soldier. The radio went silent. Sarah kept walking into the gathering darkness, her grandfather's words echoing in her mind. McKenna's don't quit. She wasn't quitting, not today, not ever. The hunt had just begun. The desert night fell like a curtain of black velvet studded with a million distant stars. Sarah McKenna moved through the darkness with a rhythm born from years of training, each step calculated, each movement deliberate. The temperature had already dropped 30 degrees from the day's brutal heat, and she knew by dawn it would hit near freezing. Desert survival rule number 1. The environment that tries to cook you alive by day will try to freeze you to death by night. She'd put 3 miles between herself and the ambush site, moving through terrain that would hide her tracks. Rocky washes, hard-packed caliche, ancient lava flows where footprints simply didn't register. Her grandfather had taught her these tricks in the Arizona deserts, and now they were keeping her alive in Mexican borderlands that wanted her dead. The radio on her vest crackled intermittently. She'd set it to scan mode, picking up fragments of enemy communications. Most of it was Spanish rapid-fire exchanges between patrol units searching for her. But occasionally she'd hear that Ukrainian accent, Colonel Volkov coordinating the hunt with the calm precision of a man who'd done this before. Sector 7, negative contact. Moving to Sector 8. Thermal scan complete, no heat signatures. She's gone dark. No fires, no movement. Either she's dead or she's very good. Volkov's voice cut through the chatter. She's not dead. A SEAL doesn't survive this long by accident. Expand the search grid, and remember she's hunting us as much as we're hunting her. Sarah allowed herself a grim smile. He understood. That made him dangerous, but it also made him predictable. Men who understood warfare thought in patterns, and patterns could be exploited. She found shelter in a small cave system just before midnight, nothing more than an overhang created by millions of years of erosion, but enough to hide her body, heat from thermal imaging. She rationed her water carefully. 6 liters sounded like a lot, but in this heat, fighting and moving constantly, she'd need a minimum of 8 liters per day just to stay functional. The math was simple and brutal. She had enough water for 18 hours, maybe 24 if she pushed it. After that, she'd start dying. Sarah pulled out the map she'd taken from the dead patrol. It showed the compound where they'd tried to capture the cartel leader, the mission that had gone so catastrophically wrong. But it also showed something else. Water sources, wells, cisterns, the infrastructure that kept the cartel operation functioning in this harsh environment. Water meant life, but it also meant enemies. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her memory lessons taught during those long Arizona weekends. In hostile territory, the enemy always clusters near resources. Water, food, shelter. You find their water, you find them. And if you're smart, you can use that. Sarah studied the map by the faint glow of a red lens flashlight, committing every detail to memory. There was a well marked 3 miles southwest near what looked like an abandoned ranch, not part of the main compound, probably used by roving patrols. She could get there by dawn, take the water, maybe set another trap. But first she needed to deal with the wound in her shoulder. Sarah had been ignoring it for hours, running on adrenaline and training, but now that she'd stopped moving, the pain demanded attention. The bullet had only grazed her during the initial ambush, carved a furrow through the muscle of her left deltoid. Not life-threatening, but already showing signs of infection in this dirty environment. She pulled out the minimal first aid supplies she'd scavenged from the dead patrol. Antiseptic wipes, gauze, medical tape. No antibiotics, those would have been back at their main base. She'd have to make do with what she had. Sarah gritted her teeth and cleaned the wound, biting back the sounds that wanted to escape. Pain was information. Information was survival. The wound was angry and hot, but not yet septic. If she kept it clean, kept moving, she might avoid the kind of infection that would end her as surely as a bullet. She was wrapping the final layer of gauze when the radio crackled again. All units be advised. American female, approximately 5'7", 130 pounds, short dark hair. SEAL warfare specialist. Considered extremely dangerous. Roe has changed. Colonel Volkov wants her alive if possible. A different voice, younger, uncertain. Sir, why alive? Wouldn't it be easier to... Volkov's voice cut through sharp as a blade. Because I said so. And because a warrior of her caliber deserves better than execution in the desert. If we take her, she'll be treated as a prisoner of war. Is that understood? Yes, Colonel. Sarah felt a strange twist in her chest. Even knowing it was probably a tactical decision, a living prisoner had intelligence value, a corpse didn't. There was something in Volkov's tone that sounded almost like genuine respect. She'd encountered men like him before. Professional soldiers who'd fought in real wars, not just cartel operations. Men who still believed in codes of honor, even when those codes had been abandoned by the world around them. They were dangerous precisely because they were competent, disciplined, and motivated by something more than money or power. Volkov wasn't doing this for the cartel. He was doing it because it was the best hunt he'd had in years. That made him her most dangerous enemy. It also made him potentially exploitable. Sarah checked her watch, 0300 hours. 3 more hours until dawn. She could reach the well by first light, take what she needed, and disappear again before the patrols intensified with daylight. She closed her eyes, allowed herself 15 minutes of rest. Not sleep, SEALs learned to function on micro-sleeps, brief periods of rest that kept the body functional without leaving you vulnerable for long. She set her internal alarm, a trick from SEER school, and let her mind drift just enough to recover. But not dream. Never dream. Because when Sarah dreamed in the field, she dreamed of cold Pacific water and Hell Week and her grandfather's voice telling her that warriors don't quit. And those dreams made her feel things that survival didn't have room for. 15 minutes later, her eyes snapped open. Time to move. The pre-dawn darkness was absolute as Sarah made her way toward the well. She moved like water flowing around obstacles, taking the path of least resistance. Every 50 meters she stopped, listened, scanned with her night vision binoculars. The desert seemed empty, but emptiness in combat zones was usually an illusion. She found the ranch house just as the eastern horizon began to lighten from black to dark blue. It was exactly what the map had promised: an old structure, probably from the 1950s, now used as a way station for cartel patrols. A single truck was parked outside. Lights burned in one window. Sarah counted bodies, 4 men visible through thermal scope. 2 awake, 2 sleeping. Shifts meant they'd been here a while, felt safe enough to let their guard down. Mistake. The well was 50 meters from the house, an old-style hand pump over a concrete pad. Sarah could see it clearly in the growing light, close enough to be convenient for the men inside, far enough that she might be able to reach it undetected if she was very, very careful. Or she could do what her grandfather would have done, what every guerrilla fighter in history had done when outnumbered and outgunned. She could turn their resource into their death trap. Sarah spent 30 minutes in careful preparation. She had 3 fragmentation grenades left from her original loadout, plus the various improvised materials she'd collected from enemy dead. Not much, but enough for someone who'd been trained in demolitions and tactical sabotage. She positioned 2 grenades in the pump house rigged to a tripwire that would activate when someone worked the pump handle. The 3rd grenade she kept for insurance. Then she punctured every water container she could find near the well, 5-gallon jugs the patrol had been using to refill their personal supplies. Precious water soaked into the ground. Sarah felt a pang of regret wasting water in the desert like this. But tactical necessity overrode sentiment. She was about to make this patrol's water source deadly. They'd have to go elsewhere. And everywhere they went, they'd burn fuel, waste time, expose themselves to her overwatch. Death by 1,000 cuts. Guerrilla warfare, the kind that won battles without ever having a fair fight. Sarah withdrew to a ridge 300 meters away, settled behind her rifle and waited. The sun broke over the horizon like a nuclear blast, temperature spiking from 50 degrees to 70 in minutes. By full daylight, it would hit 110, 115. The men in that ranch house would get thirsty, would need to refill their water supplies, would use the well. She didn't have to wait long. At 0630, one of the men emerged from the house, stretching and yawning. He walked to the well, probably planning to wash his face and fill water bottles for the day's patrol. Sarah watched through her scope, feeling nothing. No anticipation, no guilt, just cold calculation. The man grabbed the pump handle, began working it up and down. The explosion was immediate and catastrophic. The grenade detonated with enough force to shred the pump house and everything within a 10-meter radius. The man was thrown backward, clearly dead before he hit the ground. The 3 remaining men boiled out of the house, weapons up, scanning for threats. They couldn't see Sarah at 300 meters, positioned in rocks that broke up her silhouette. They were looking for immediate danger, not a sniper with patience. One man rushed to the well, probably trying to save his comrade. Sarah put a round through his chest. He dropped instantly. The other 2 took cover behind the truck, smart enough to recognize sniper fire. They started returning fire in Sarah's general direction, spraying rounds that came nowhere close. Panic fire. Untrained fire. Sarah waited. Let them burn through their magazines, let their adrenaline spike and crash. When they paused to reload, she took the shot. 1 round center mass dropped the man on the left. The last survivor broke, running for the house. Sarah led him by 2 feet, squeezed the trigger, watched him tumble. 4 bodies, 4 minutes. Other patrol that wouldn't report back. Sarah stayed in position for 20 minutes, watching for reinforcements. None came. These patrols were spread too thin, covering too much territory. Volkov was playing a numbers game, trying to overwhelm her with quantity. But quantity without coordination was just targets. She moved down to the ranch house, methodically searching it. Found more water, thank God, bringing her supply back up to 8 liters. Found food. Found spare ammunition for AK-47s, which still didn't fit her M4, but she took it anyway. Might be useful for IEDs later. And in a footlocker under one of the beds, she found something unexpected. A radio encryption keycard. Sarah stared at it, mind racing. This was intelligence gold. With this card, she could decrypt their communications coordinate with any American forces in the area, maybe even call in an airstrike on the cartel compound. But it also meant they'd know she had it, meant they'd change encryption protocols immediately, meant she had maybe a 2-hour window before it became useless. Sarah made a decision. She plugged the card into the radio she'd captured, scrolled through frequencies until she found what she was looking for: American Military Emergency Channel. She keyed the microphone, spoke quickly and clearly. Any station, any station. This is Ghost Hawk 27 SEAL Team 4. I am alive, mobile, and operating in hostile territory approximately 30 miles south of the border. Multiple enemy KIA. Requesting extraction or support. Authentication code, Whiskey Tango 79er. How copy? Static. Sarah waited 30 seconds, tried again. Still nothing. She was about to try a third time when the radio crackled. Not American Ukrainian accent. Ghost Hawk 27. Volkov's voice was calm, almost amused. I've been monitoring that frequency, hoping you'd try exactly this. I'm afraid your people can't hear you. We're running a jammer that covers a 20-mile radius. You're talking to empty air. Sarah's jaw tightened, but she keyed the mic anyway. Colonel Volkov. Ah, so you know my name. Good. Mutual respect is important in these situations. A pause. You've killed, let me see, 17 of my men in the last 30 hours. Impressive. Truly impressive. They shouldn't have gotten in my way. No argument there. They were cartel soldiers, not professionals. You did me a favor, honestly showed me which ones weren't cut out for real combat. Another pause. But now I'm bringing in my real team. 6 men, all former special forces, Ukrainian, Russian, Polish, men who fought in Donbass, Crimea, Syria, men who won't make the mistakes the others did. Sarah felt ice in her stomach. This changed the equation entirely. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Professional courtesy. You deserve to know what you're facing. And because, Volkov's tone shifted, became almost philosophical. Because I want you to understand something, McKenna. I was like you once. Fought for a country that promised honor and got betrayal. Ukraine asked for help in 2014, and the West gave speeches instead of soldiers. So I learned that nations are lies, but the warrior's code is real. I fight now for money, yes, but I still fight with honor. Honor, Sarah couldn't keep the edge from her voice. You work for cartel butchers. I work for whoever pays me to do what I'm good at. But that doesn't mean I've forgotten who I am. A long pause. I'm offering you a deal, McKenna. Surrender. I'll ensure you're treated as a prisoner of war, not a cartel captive. Geneva Convention standards. You'll live. Eventually be exchanged or ransomed back to your people. And if I refuse, then my team hunts you down and kills you. But I promise you this, when we meet, when that moment comes, it will be soldier to soldier. You'll die with your weapon in your hand fighting. Not executed on your knees. You have my word. Sarah thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. Tell your team I'll be waiting. She heard what might have been a chuckle. I expected nothing less. One more thing, McKenna. A warning, soldier to soldier. You're wounded. I can tell from how you moved at the well, favoring your left side. And you're running low on ammunition. You've fired, I count 37 rounds since this started. That leaves you with, what, 83, maybe less. He'd been tracking her ammunition expenditure, calculating her capabilities, her limitations. You're good, Volkov continued, but you're one person. One person with no support, no resupply, and an infection spreading in your shoulder that will kill you in 3 days if you don't get antibiotics. The math is simple. Surrender and live. Fight and die. I've heard that math before, Sarah said quietly. Hell week. They told me the same thing. Quit or die trying. I didn't quit then. Not quitting now. Another pause, longer this time. Then I'll see you soon, American, and may the best warrior win. The radio went dead. Sarah stood in the ransacked ranch house weighing her options. Volkov was right about almost everything. Her shoulder was infected, getting worse by the hour. She was down to 89 rounds. She'd counted every shot. And now she was facing a 6-man team of professionals instead of cartel thugs. The smart play was to run. Put as much distance between herself and the cartel compound as possible, try to make it to the border before the infection took her down. But the smart play left Volkov free to continue hunting, left him thinking he'd broken her spirit, made her run. And Sarah McKenna didn't run. Her grandfather had taught her something else during those desert weekends, something he'd learned in the frozen hell of Chosin Reservoir when the Chinese came at them in human waves. Sometimes the only way to win is to make them think they're winning. Sarah smiled, a cold expression that held no humor. She knew exactly what to do. Over the next 6 hours, she put together a plan that would have made her guerrilla warfare instructors proud. She used the ranch house as a base, the dead men's supplies as resources, and every dirty trick she'd learned in 12 years of special operations. She rigged the entire house with improvised explosive devices. Grenades wired to door handles, claymores aimed at windows, tripwires strung across every approach. When Volkov's team came, and they would come, the ranch house would become a death trap. But she wouldn't be there to spring it. Sarah planted evidence everywhere. Blood-soaked bandages from her shoulder wound, more than was realistic, but enough to make them think she was bleeding out. Empty water bottles suggesting she was dehydrated. A trail leading northeast away from the border, as if she'd gotten disoriented and was wandering deeper into hostile territory. Every guerrilla fighter's favorite trick: make the enemy think you're weak, lead them into a kill zone, then hit them from an unexpected angle. By noon, she was finished. The ranch house was a bomb waiting for the wrong person to walk through the door. The trail was laid. All she needed now was patience and a good firing position. Sarah found it a quarter-mile away on a ridge with clear sight lines to the house and multiple escape routes. She dug a shallow hide, covered it with desert camouflage, and settled in to wait. The sun beat down like a physical punishment. Temperature hit 115 by 2 p.m. Sarah rationed her water, one small sip every 30 minutes, barely enough to keep her conscious. The infection in her shoulder was making her feverish, making the heat feel even worse. She could feel her body starting to shut down, conservation mode kicking in. Not yet, not until this was done. At 3 p.m., the radio crackled. Volkov's voice, but different now, sharper, focused. All units converge on Ranch Outpost 7. American target's blood trail leads there. She's wounded badly, probably delirious. 6-man team will clear the structure. Everyone else establish perimeter. Nobody shoots unless I give the order. We take her alive if possible. Sarah watched through her scope as vehicles appeared from multiple directions. 246 trucks total. At least 30 men, all moving with the military precision toward the ranch house. But only 6 approached directly. Volkov's elite team. They were good. Sarah had to admit it. They moved like professionals, covering each other's sectors, communicating with hand signals. Body armor, modern weapons, night vision mounted and ready for low-light conditions. These weren't cartel thugs playing soldier. These were the real thing. The team leader, a big man with Slavic features who could only be Volkov himself, halted his team 50 meters from the house. He studied it through binoculars for a long moment. Then he pulled out his radio. "McKenna, I know you're listening. I know you can see us right now." Sarah stayed silent, scope steady on the team. "This ranch house is a trap. I can see the tripwires, the disturbed earth where you've planted mines, the blood trail that's just a little too obvious." Volkov lowered his binoculars, looked directly at the ridge where Sarah was hidden. Not at her exact position, he couldn't know that, but close enough to make her heart skip. "You're very good," he continued, "but I've been doing this for 20 years. I've fought in every war from Chechnya to Syria. I know every trick because I've used every trick." He gestured to his team. They immediately began backing away from the house, moving into flanking positions. "So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to collapse the perimeter, put 30 men in a circle around this area. Then we're going to work our way in meter by meter until we find you. No rushing in, no traps, just professional soldiers doing professional work." Sarah watched him through her scope, calculating distances, wind trajectory. She could take him now. One shot, center mass, kill the leader, throw the whole operation into chaos. But that would reveal her position. And 30 men with automatic weapons would turn this hillside into a kill zone before she could relocate. Volkov seemed to sense her thought process. "Don't do it, McKenna. Don't take the shot. Because right now, you and I are the only real soldiers here. Everyone else is just playing the game. Wouldn't it be a shame if we killed each other before we had a chance to talk face to face?" "What do you want to talk about?" Sarah keyed her radio voice steady despite the fever building in her veins. I want to understand you. Why you keep fighting when the fight is lost. Why you won't surrender when surrender is rational. Why a woman who should be back in America safe and decorated and famous is instead dying in a Mexican desert for what pride duty, a promise to a dead grandfather. Sarah felt her finger tighten on the trigger. How do you know about my grandfather? Because I did what any professional would do. I researched you, found your service record, found newspaper articles about you from your hometown, found everything there is to know about Sarah McKenna, the girl who became a SEAL because she promised a Korean War veteran she'd never quit. Volkov's voice softened. My grandfather was Red Army, fought the Nazis at Stalingrad. He taught me that warriors fight for more than nations. They fight for memory, for honor, for the men who came before. Your grandfather taught you the same thing, didn't he? Sarah didn't answer, couldn't answer around the sudden tightness in her throat. I know what's driving you, Volkov continued. I know because the same thing drives me. We're the last of something dying, the last soldiers who believe the old codes still matter, who think honor is real and oaths are binding and warfare is more than just murder with better technology. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried genuine emotion. I don't want to kill you, McKenna. You're the first worthy opponent I've faced in years. But if you keep fighting, but I will kill you, because that's the code too. You honor your enemy by fighting them with everything you have. Sarah watched him through her scope, watched as he stood there fully exposed, making himself a target, daring her to take the shot or keep talking. She made a decision that would have horrified her instructors. What do you want, Volkov really want? I want to offer you a deal, one soldier to another. He pulled something from his pocket, held it up. A radio. This is an American military emergency radio, unencrypted, short range but enough to reach the border. I'm going to set it down right here, frequency already set to your SEAL team's emergency channel. Then I'm going to walk away. Why? Because you've earned it. Because in 2 days you've done more damage to this operation than a whole platoon of Mexican military. Because I respect you too much to watch you die of infection in a hole in the ground. He placed the radio on a rock step and back. But understand this, if you use it, if you call in your people, this game is over. I'll withdraw my men. You will get extracted. You'll go home. And I'll disappear into whatever war comes next. And if I don't use it, Volkov smiled a warrior's smile that held no joy, only recognition. Then we continue. You keep hunting, I keep hunting, and eventually one of us doesn't walk away. But at least we'll both know we fought against someone worthy. He turned to his team. We're withdrawing. 1 kilometer perimeter. If she wants us, she knows where to find us. Sarah watched through her scope as they mounted up, as the trucks pulled back, as Volkov himself climbed into the lead vehicle and drove away. The radio sat on the rock, glinting in the desert sun. Sarah stayed in her hide scope on that radio, mind racing. It could be another trap. Could be rigged to explode. Could be transmitting her position even now. Or it could be exactly what Volkov said, a gesture of respect from one soldier to another. Either way, using it meant giving up, meant admitting she couldn't win this alone, meant calling for help after spending 2 days proving she didn't need it. Sarah thought of her grandfather, thought of Chosin Reservoir and 15,000 Marines surrounded by 100,000 Chinese. They'd called it a retreat, but the Marines called it advancing in a different direction. They'd fought their way out against impossible odds because they refused to surrender, refused to quit, refused to accept that the math said they should all die. But they'd also called for air support, artillery support, naval gunfire support. They'd used every resource available because survival wasn't about pride, it was about getting your people home alive. What would Grandpa Jake tell her to do? Sarah closed her eyes, heard his voice as clear as if he stood beside her in that hide site. Courage isn't about dying brave, kiddo. It's about living smart. There's no shame in calling for help when you need it. The shame is in needing it and being too proud to ask. Sarah opened her eyes, made her decision. She'd wait until dark, then she'd retrieve that radio. And if it was real, if it worked, she'd use it. Not because she was giving up, but because sometimes surviving meant accepting that you couldn't do it alone. The sun began its slow descent toward the western horizon, painting the desert in shades of red and gold. Sarah maintained her position, conserving energy, letting her body rest while her mind stayed alert. And somewhere out there in that vast expanse of hostile territory, Colonel Anton Volkov and his team waited to see what choice the American SEAL would make. Soldier to soldier, warrior to warrior. The hunt wasn't over yet. Darkness fell over the desert like a blessing and a curse. The temperature plummeted 40 degrees in 2 hours from 110 to 70, then lower. Sarah McKenna shivered in her hide-sight muscles, cramping from 12 hours of absolute stillness. The infection in her shoulder had gotten worse. She could feel it spreading like fire through her bloodstream, making her thoughts sluggish and her vision blur at the edges. Fever dreams threatened to pull her under. Twice in the last hour, she jerked awake, not remembering that she'd fallen asleep. That was dangerous. That was how operators died, closed their eyes for just a moment, and never woke up. But the radio still sat on that rock 200 meters away, untouched, waiting. Sarah had watched it through her scope for 6 hours, looking for any sign of tampering. Thermal signatures that would indicate electronics, disturbed earth that would suggest mines. Any hint that Volkov's gesture of respect was actually a trap. She'd seen nothing. Just an American military radio sitting on a rock in the middle of hostile territory. At 2200 hours, Sarah made her move. She low-crawled out of her hide site, every movement calculated to avoid detection. The night was moonless cloud cover blocking even starlight. Perfect conditions for movement, but also perfect conditions for ambush. If Volkov had left observers with night vision, she'd be spotted immediately. But she had to risk it. The infection was winning. Her body temperature had spiked to 103, maybe higher. She had perhaps 12 hours before sepsis set in, before her immune system shut down, and the desert claimed her without anyone firing a shot. Sarah covered the 200 meters in 30 minutes, stopping every 10 feet to listen to scan to make sure she was alone. Her SEAL training had included dozens of scenarios exactly like this, approaching unknown objects in hostile territory, assuming everything was a trap until proven otherwise. When she finally reached the rock, she spent another 5 minutes examining the radio from every angle, looking for wires, pressure plates, remote detonation signals, anything that would indicate this was the last mistake she'd ever make. The radio was clean, just a standard ANPRC 152 tactical radio military issue set to emergency frequency 243.0 megahertz. The battery indicator showed 70% charge. Someone had taken care of this equipment, maintained it properly. Sarah picked it up, half expecting an explosion. None came. She keyed the microphone, kept her voice low and steady, despite the fever making her hands shake. Any station, this is Ghost Hawk 27 SEAL Team 4. I am alive and mobile in hostile territory 30 miles south of border checkpoint Delta 4. Multiple enemy KIA requesting immediate extraction. Authentication code Whiskey Tango 79er. How copy over? Static hissed through the speaker. Sarah counted to 30, tried again. Any station, this is Ghost Hawk 27. If you're receiving this transmission, I am an American SEAL operating alone in enemy territory. I need extraction. Please respond. More static, then cutting through the white noise like a miracle of voice. Ghost Hawk 27, this is Reaper 51. We read you 5 by 5. Authenticate Lima Charlie 9. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. Lima Charlie 9. That was the response code updated weekly that only SEAL Team 4 and their air support would know. This was real. This was her people. Reaper 51 authentication code, Lima Charlie 9 confirmed. Be advised I am approximately 30 miles south of the border vicinity of coordinates. She rattled off her GPS position from memory numbers she'd been tracking obsessively for 2 days. Copy your position, Ghost Hawk. Stand by for tasking. A pause, then the voice came back more urgent and, Ghost Hawk, be advised we have 2 Blackhawks spooling up now. ETA to your location 25 minutes. Can you move to extraction point 25 minutes? Sarah looked at the darkness around her, the hostile terrain, the kilometers between her and safety. 25 minutes was an eternity when every second counted. Negative Reaper. I am combat ineffective, shoulder wound infected. High fever, I can mark my position but cannot move to alternate LZ. You'll have to come to me. Another pause, longer this time. Sarah could imagine the conversation happening on the other end. Mission commanders weighing the risk. Pilots calculating fuel and approach vectors. Everyone knowing that flying 2 helicopters into hostile territory to extract 1 operator was exactly the kind of mission that could go catastrophically wrong. Ghost Hawk, understand you are combat ineffective. Be advised we're coming in hot. Enemy activity is significant in your area. Mark your position with IR strobe when you hear rotors. Do not, I say again, do not use visible smoke or flares. We don't want to advertise your location to hostiles. Roger that, Reaper. IR strobe on your call. How copy? Lima Charlie Ghost Hawk. We're coming for you. Hang tight. The radio went silent. Sarah allowed herself 10 seconds of pure relief. Help was coming. Real help. In 25 minutes, she'd be in a helicopter on her way to a field hospital surrounded by her people instead of dying alone in the Mexican desert. Then training reasserted itself. 25 minutes was a long time. Long enough for Volkov to intercept the transmission, to figure out what was happening, to move his forces into position. She had to assume he'd heard everything. Had to assume he was already repositioning his team to intercept the helicopters or ambush her position, which meant she needed to move. Now, Sarah stood up swayed as dizziness washed over her. The fever was getting worse, vision tunneling at the edges. She forced herself to move to put distance between herself and the radio position. If Volkov had triangulated the transmission, he'd send his team here first. She needed high ground, a position she could defend for 25 minutes against whatever came at her. A place where helicopter pilots could see her IR strobe without exposing themselves to ground fire. There, a small ridge 300 meters north, rocky and elevated with clear sight lines in all directions. Not perfect, but nothing about this situation was perfect. Sarah started moving and immediately her body rebelled. Her legs felt like lead. Her shoulders screamed with every step. The fever made the world tilt and spin in ways that had nothing to do with the terrain. She fell twice in the first 100 meters. The second time she stayed down for a full minute, face pressed against the cold ground, wondering if she had the strength to get up. Her grandfather's voice cut through the fever fog. The desert kills those who quit. I know, Grandpa, Sarah whispered into the dirt. I know. She pushed herself up, kept moving. One step, another. Distance measured in meters instead of miles, but every meter was a victory against her failing body. Somewhere behind her, she heard engines. Multiple vehicles moving fast. Volkov had heard the transmission. Volkov was coming. Sarah reached the ridge with 10 minutes to spare. Her last magazine was loaded, safety off, ready. She had maybe 30 rounds left. Enough for one good fight if she made every shot count. She set up her position exactly the way SEAL instructors had taught her. Back against rock for cover. Clear fields of fire in 3 directions. Escape route planned if everything went sideways. IR strobe clipped to her vest, ready to activate the moment she heard rotors. And then she waited, rifle steady despite her shaking hands, watching the darkness for movement. The vehicles appeared 5 minutes later, 2 trucks' headlights off, moving with a tactical precision toward her last known position. They reached the radio site, stopped, and 6 figures dismounted. Even at 300 meters, even in darkness, Sarah recognized the lead figure. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the confidence of a man who'd fought in a dozen wars. Colonel Anton Volkov. He picked up the radio she'd left behind, examined it, then looked directly at Sarah's ridge. Not at her exact position, he couldn't know that, but close enough that she felt the weight of his gaze. Volkov keyed his own radio, and Sarah heard his voice through the set she still carried. McKenna, I know you are out there. I know you called your people, and I know they're coming. A pause. I'm not going to stop them. Sarah blinked in surprise, finger tightening on her trigger. You're wondering why, Volkov continued. Why I'd give you a radio if I was just going to hunt you down when you used it. The answer is simple. You earned this. 2 days alone in hostile territory. 17 confirmed kills. Tactical thinking that would put most Special Forces officers to shame. You've proven everything you needed to prove. He set the radio down, spread his hands. So I'm withdrawing, taking my team back to the compound. Your helicopters will have clear airspace. No one will shoot at them. No one will interfere with your extraction. Sarah kept her scope on him, waiting for the trap to reveal itself. But understand something, McKenna. This courtesy I'm showing you, this is soldier to soldier, warrior to warrior. The cartel, they wanted you dead or captured for propaganda. I told them no. Told them you'd earned an honorable exit. Some of them didn't like that answer. Volkov's tone darkened. So while my team is standing down, I can't promise the same for everyone else. There are cartel units out here that don't answer to me, units that see your escape as unacceptable. If they find you before your helicopters arrive, he let the sentence hang. Watch your 6 American. And if we meet again in another war, another desert, I hope we're on the same side next time. Volkov climbed back into his truck. The vehicles turned around, drove back toward the compound, and disappeared into the darkness. Sarah stayed in position, scope tracking them until they were gone. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that a soldier's words still meant something in this broken world. But trust got you killed in combat zones. She kept her rifle up, kept scanning, kept waiting for the attack she knew was coming from somewhere. The sound reached her 8 minutes later, not from the direction Volkov had gone, but from the east. More engines, faster, more aggressive. And through her night vision, she saw them 4 trucks, technical vehicles with machine guns mounted in the beds racing toward her position. Cartel fighters, the ones who didn't answer to Volkov, the ones who wanted her dead regardless of soldiers' honor or warriors' respect. Sarah checked her ammunition. 29 rounds, 4 trucks, probably 20 men total. The math was impossible. But then again, the math had been impossible since this whole nightmare started and she was still breathing. She settled into her firing position, controlled her breathing, and prepared to sell her life as expensively as possible. The trucks came into range at 200 meters. Sarah aimed at the lead vehicle's windshield, exhaled slowly, and fired. The glass shattered. The truck swerved violently, crashed into a boulder, and stopped moving. The other 3 trucks immediately spread out professional tactics, making themselves harder targets. The machine guns opened up tracers, tearing through the darkness like angry fireflies. Rounds impacted the rocks around Sarah, forcing her down behind cover. She blind-fired 3 rounds over the rock, not aiming, just trying to make them think twice about rushing her position. Then she shifted 10 meters left, popped up in a different location, and fired again. Dropped one of the machine gunners. The return fire intensified. They'd seen her muzzle flash, knew where she was. Sarah dropped flat as bullets chewed up the rock above her head, showering her with stone fragments. This was it. This was where her war ended. Pinned down, outgunned, with maybe 20 rounds left and nowhere to run. The fever made everything feel distant, dreamlike. Memories flooded back her grandfather's weathered face. Hell Week's frozen ocean, every moment that had led to this ridge where she would make her stand. She wasn't here because of politics or national interest or strategic objectives. She was here because warriors protected the weak, because someone had to stand between innocent people and men who'd burn the world for profit, because her grandfather had taught her that honor wasn't about winning, it was about fighting for something bigger than yourself, even when the fight was hopeless, especially when the fight was hopeless. Sarah reloaded her last magazine, 20 rounds, and prepared to make them count. Then she heard it, distant at first but growing louder, the deep rhythmic thunder of helicopter rotors cutting through desert air. The Blackhawks were early. Sarah grabbed her IR strobe, activated it, held it above her head. The strobe was invisible to the naked eye, but would light up like a beacon through the pilot's night vision. Reaper 5-1, Ghost Hawk 2-7. I am under fire, multiple hostiles, immediate assistance required. The reply was instant. Ghost Hawk Reaper has your position. We see your strobe, going weapons hot. Keep your head down. The 2 Blackhawks came in low and fast, door gunners already firing. Minigun fire shredded the night, thousands of rounds per minute tearing into the cartel trucks. One exploded in a fireball. Another tried to flee and was torn apart by rocket fire. The remaining fighters broke, running for any cover they could find. The helicopters circled once, ensuring the immediate threat was neutralized. Then one broke off to establish overwatch while the other dropped towards Sarah's position. The rotor wash hit her like a physical force, blowing sand and debris everywhere. Sarah shielded her eyes, saw the helicopter settle into a hover 5 feet off the ground. The crew chief leaned out, waving frantically. Come on, move, move, move. Sarah tried to stand. Her legs buckled. The fever had spiked past 104, and her body was shutting down conservation mode, engaging whether she wanted it or not. Strong hands grabbed her vest, hauled her toward the helicopter. The crew chief and door gunner physically lifted her into the cabin, later on the deck. The moment she was clear, the pilot pulled pitch and the Blackhawks surged upward. Through the open door, Sarah caught one last glimpse of the desert below. Burning vehicles, scattered bodies. The ridge where she'd made her last stand, and in the distance, a single set of headlights stationary watching. Volkov, keeping his word, letting her go. Sarah wanted to feel triumph, wanted to feel relief. Instead, she felt only exhaustion in the strange kinship of one warrior recognizing another across the divide of nationality and allegiance. The crew chief pressed a bottle of water to her lips. Easy, chief, small sips. You're severely dehydrated. Sarah drank the water, painful, going down a throat that felt like sandpaper. How, how did you find me? Your radio transmission. Plus, we've been tracking cartel communications for 2 days. When chatter exploded about an American SEAL killing their guys, we knew someone was alive down there. The crew chief grinned. Command wanted to wait for daylight. Commander Barrett told them to fuck off and authorized immediate extraction. Barrett, her commanding officer, had gone to bat for her, risked her career to bring Sarah home. The others, Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. Tyler Grant, the team. The crew chief's expression sobered. Grant didn't make it. Neither did Hayes. The rest of the team made it out. They've been at FO Sentinel raising hell trying to get permission to come back for you. Tyler, dead because he'd been sitting in the wrong seat when the IED detonated. Dead because warfare was random and brutal and didn't care about who deserved to survive. Sarah closed her eyes, let the grief wash through her. She'd mourn later, process later. Right now, she just needed to hold on till they reached the field hospital. Chief McKenna, the crew chief's voice was gentler now. You need to know something. What you did out there, surviving 3 days alone, taking out that many hostiles, making it to extraction, that's going to be legend. They're already talking about it at Coronado. You just rewrote the book on E&E operations. I just did what I was trained to do, Sarah mumbled, fever pulling her toward unconsciousness. No, ma'am, you did more than that. You proved something people have been arguing about for decades. You proved women can do this job. Not someday, not eventually, right now. You proved it in blood. Sarah felt herself slipping away, the fever finally winning. But she heard the crew chief's next words as if from very far away. Your grandfather would be proud. The helicopter ate up the miles, racing north toward American airspace. Below, the Mexican desert scrolled past, indifferent to the small drama of one woman's survival. In the cockpit, the pilots coordinated with Border Patrol and military assets, ensuring clear airspace all the way to the FOB. And on the desert floor in a truck, 3 miles from the extraction site, Colonel Anton Volkov watched the helicopters disappear into American airspace. He lit a cigarette, took a long drag, and spoke quietly to the radio operator beside him. Make sure our people know the American SEAL is off limits. Anyone who goes after her or her team faces me personally. Understood. Yes, Colonel. Volkov took another drag, exhaled slowly into the desert night. She was magnificent. Absolutely magnificent. In another life, another war, I would have been honored to serve beside her. His radio operator, a veteran of Crimea and Syria, nodded slowly. Will we see her again, Colonel the American? Volkov smiled a warrior's smile that held both respect and melancholy. I hope so. I hope the universe gives us another chance to test ourselves against each other. But next time, he crushed out his cigarette, next time I hope we're fighting together instead of apart. The world needs more warriors like her, and fewer wars that turn warriors into enemies. He put the truck in gear and drove back toward the compound, leaving Sarah McKenna to her people and her destiny. Sarah woke up in the field hospital at FO Sentinel 6 hours later. The infection had been brought under control with massive doses of antibiotics. Her shoulder had been properly cleaned and dressed. IV fluids had rehydrated her body and brought her fever down to manageable levels. Commander Elena Barrett was sitting beside her bed, gray-streaked hair pulled back, face-lined with exhaustion and relief. Welcome back, Chief, Barrett said quietly. You scared the hell out of us. Sarah's throat was dry, voice rough. The team? Safe. Everyone made it except Grant and Hayes. We recovered their bodies, brought them home. Barrett's jaw tightened. The mission was a clusterfuck from start to finish. Intel was bad. We walked into a prepared ambush. I should have aborted when the compound showed more hostiles than expected. You made the call you had to make, ma'am. And you paid for it. 3 days alone in that hellscape, fighting on no support. Barrett shook her head. The after-action report is going to be classified, but Sarah, what you did out there is going into the SEAL survival curriculum. Every operator will study how you evaded, how you fought, how you turned that situation from a death sentence into a tactical victory. Sarah tried to sit up, winced as her shoulder protested. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like barely surviving. That's what victory looks like sometimes. Not glory and medals, just living long enough to see another sunrise. Barrett leaned forward. But here's what you need to understand. The brass has been watching this. The debates about women in special operations, about whether female operators can handle the physical and mental demands, you just settled those debates. Not with studies or test scores, with results. Ma'am, I just did my job. Your job killed 17 enemy combatants, destroyed multiple vehicles and supply caches, survived for 72 hours in hostile territory with minimal supplies, and made it to extraction on your own legs. Barrett's eyes held something Sarah had never seen before: unvarnished respect. Chief McKenna, they're recommending you for the Navy Cross, second highest decoration for valor. You've earned it 10 times over. The Navy Cross. Sarah thought about the weight of that medal, the responsibility it carried. Thought about Tyler Grant, who'd never receive any medal because he died in that Humvee. Thought about all the operators who'd done heroic things and never came home to be decorated. I want to request that Tyler Grant receive the Silver Star, Sarah said quietly. He died protecting his team. He deserves recognition. Barrett nodded. Already submitted the paperwork. Grant and Hayes will both receive Silver Stars. Posthumously. She paused. There's something else. A package arrived for you this morning. No return address. Mexican postmark. She handed Sarah a small box. Inside was a single item, a Ukrainian military medal, old and tarnished, the kind given to soldiers in the Soviet era, and a note written in precise English: for a warrior worthy of respect. We were enemies by circumstance, but soldiers by choice. May we meet again in better times. Sarah held the medal, felt its weight in her palm. Volkov, sending her a piece of his own history, his own warrior's journey. Do you know who sent this? Barrett asked carefully. Sarah thought about lying, thought about operational security and enemy combatants, and all the reasons she should report this contact. But she also thought about honor, about soldiers' codes that transcended nationality, about a warrior who'd let her escape when he could have killed her. An enemy combatant who showed professional courtesy, Sarah said finally. Nothing more. Barrett studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Understood. That stays between us. The next 3 days were a blur of debriefings, medical evaluations, and recovery. Sarah's shoulder healed cleanly once the infection was controlled. Her body recovered from the dehydration and fever. But the psychological weight took longer to process. She'd killed 17 people. Each one was justified. Each one was necessary for survival. But knowing something was necessary didn't make it easy to carry. Over the next 3 days, Sarah worked with the Navy psychologist to process the survivor's guilt. Tyler's death wasn't her fault. It was random, brutal chance. She had to accept that and move forward. On the 7th day, she was cleared to return to the United States. Commander Barrett arranged for her to fly back to Coronado Naval Base on a military transport away from media attention and political grandstanding. Senior Chief Marcus Kane met her on the tarmac. He saluted, something he had never done for her before. I was wrong about you, McKenna. You're a warrior, and the training command wants you to teach the next generation what you learned out there. Sarah nodded. When do I start? Whenever you're ready. Next month, I'm ready. Kane smiled. McKennas don't quit, right? No, Senior Chief, we don't. Teaching, passing on knowledge, ensuring that other operators learn from her experience without having to endure the same nightmare. When do I start? Sarah asked. Whenever you're ready. Could be next month, could be next year. Command says it's your call. You've earned some latitude. Sarah thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. Next month, I'm ready. Because sitting around processing trauma would drive her insane. She needed purpose, needed to turn her pain into something useful, something that might save lives down the road. Kane nodded approvingly. I figured you'd say that. McKennas don't quit, right? No, Senior Chief, we don't. 6 months later, Sarah stood in front of her first class of SEAL candidates at the Naval Special Warfare Center in Coronado. 25 students ranging from 22 to 35 years old. 4 of them were women, the new generation walking through the door Sarah had kicked open. "Good morning," she began, voice steady and confident. "I'm Chief McKenna. I'm here to teach you advanced survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. The stuff that keeps you alive when everything's gone to hell and you're alone in hostile territory." She tapped a button and the screen behind her lit up with a satellite image of Mexican desert. "Let me tell you about the time I spent 72 hours behind enemy lines with no water, no support, and hostiles hunting me from every direction. Let me tell you what worked, what didn't, and what I learned about warfare that no classroom can teach." For the next hour, Sarah walked them through every detail: the ambush, the crash, the decision to fight instead of hide, the water procurement, the guerrilla tactics, the impossible choices that survival demanded. When she finished, the classroom was silent. Then one of the female students, Petty Officer Emma Parker, 23 years old, fresh out of Bud S, raised her hand. "Chief McKenna, can I ask, were you scared out there?" Sarah didn't hesitate. "Every second. Fear is normal. Fear keeps you alert, keeps you making smart decisions. The enemy isn't fear, it's panic. Fear with discipline is survival. Fear without discipline is death. How do you maintain discipline when everything's falling apart? You remember why you're doing this. You remember the people counting on you. You remember the warriors who came before, who survived worse with less." Sarah paused, felt her grandfather's presence like a warm hand on her shoulder. "And you remember that quitting is always an option, but it's never the right one." Another student, male older, spoke up. "Chief, some people are saying your operation was lucky, that circumstances aligned just right for you to survive. What do you say to that?" Sarah smiled, not with humor, but with the hard-earned wisdom of someone who'd faced death and walked away. "I say luck is when preparation meets opportunity. I survived because my grandfather taught me desert survival when I was 13, because I didn't quit during Hell Week when every muscle screamed at me to ring that bell, because I learned from instructors like Senior Chief Kane how to think tactically under pressure. Luck didn't keep me alive for 3 days. Training did. Will did. The refusal to accept that the math said I should be dead." She looked around the classroom, making eye contact with each student. "Every one of you will face a moment when survival seems impossible, when the odds are stacked against you and logic says you should give up. In that moment, you'll have a choice. You can quit, and there's no shame in recognizing when a fight is truly unwinnable. Or you can reach deeper than you've ever reached before, find reserves you didn't know existed, and fight your way through the impossible." Sarah's voice softened slightly. "My grandfather used to say the desert kills those who quit, but it's bigger than that. Life kills those who quit. Warfare kills those who quit. The moment you accept defeat, defeat becomes reality. But if you refuse to quit, if you keep fighting and adapting and surviving, you give yourself a chance. Maybe a small chance. Maybe a 1 in a million chance. But a chance." The class absorbed this in silence. Then Emma Parker spoke again, voice quiet but determined. "Chief McKenna, they're saying you're the reason women are being accepted into more special operations roles, that you proved we can handle it. Do you feel that pressure?" Sarah thought about the question carefully. Thought about every female operator who would come after her carrying the weight of her success or failure. "Here's what I know," she said finally. "I didn't prove women can do this job. I proved Sarah McKenna can do this job. Each of you, male, female, doesn't matter. You'll have to prove yourselves individually. Your gender won't save you or condemn you. Your skills will. Your decision-making will. Your refusal to quit will." She gestured to the 4 female students. "You're not here to represent all women. You're here to become the best operators you can be. Period. Anyone who can meet the standards, who can perform under pressure, who can bring their teammates home alive, that person belongs in the teams. Everything else is politics and noise." After the class, Emma Parker approached Sarah privately. "Chief, can I ask you something off the record?" "Go ahead." "Do you ever doubt yourself? Ever wonder if you actually belong here, or if you just got lucky?" Sarah looked at this young woman, 23 years old, fresh face, standing at the beginning of a journey. Sarah had been walking for 12 years and saw herself at that age. full of determination and doubt in equal measure. Every single day, Sarah admitted. Imposter syndrome doesn't go away when you prove yourself. It just gets quieter. But here's the secret: every operator feels that way sometimes. Every single one of us has moments of doubt. The difference between those who make it and those who don't isn't confidence. It's persistence. It's showing up every day and doing the work even when the doubt is screaming in your ear. Emma nodded slowly. Thank you, Chief, for kicking the door open, for showing us it's possible. I didn't kick it open for you, Parker. I kicked it open for me. You want to walk through it? You earn that right yourself every day, every mission, every decision. Make me proud by being so damn good that my gender becomes irrelevant to your success. Yes, Chief. After Emma left, Sarah walked alone to the memorial wall at the Special Warfare Center. The wall listed every SEAL killed in action, names engraved in bronze that gleamed in the California sun. She found Tyler Grant's name, ran her fingers over the letters. I'm teaching Tyler, she said quietly, just like you always said I should. Making sure the next generation learns from our mistakes. Making sure fewer operators end up on this wall. She stood there for a long moment, feeling the weight of promises made and kept. Then she walked to her office, pulled out the Ukrainian medal Volkov had sent, and placed it in her desk drawer next to her grandfather's dog tags and her own Navy Cross citation. 3 pieces of metal, 3 different wars, 3 different warriors connected by the common thread of honor and sacrifice. That evening, Sarah stood before her grandfather's headstone at the VA cemetery in Phoenix. She placed her Navy Cross beside the marker. I kept my promise, Grandpa. I didn't quit. The sun set over the desert, painting the sky in shades of red and gold, the same colors she'd seen in Mexico when she'd refused to die. She drove back to Coronado, back to her students, back to the work of turning pain into purpose. The sun set over the desert, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. Sarah stayed until full darkness, keeping vigil over the warrior who'd made her what she was. Then she drove back to Coronado, back to her students, back to the work of turning pain into purpose. Because that's what warriors did. They survived, they adapted, they taught the next generation. And they never, ever quit. 2 years later, Emma Parker graduated top of her SEAL class. 5 years later, she led a classified operation in Syria that saved 17 hostages. 10 years later, she became the first female SEAL to reach the rank of Master Chief. The legacy lived on. The door stayed open. And somewhere in the world, in another desert, in another war, warriors continued to fight and survive and prove that honor still mattered in a world that had largely forgotten what the word meant. Sarah McKenna's war hadn't ended in that Mexican desert. It had just begun, and she was ready for whatever came next. Because SEALs don't quit, not ever.